let me give a little bit of history as to how and why we got here today. Casey Sachs, who some of you may remember from her tenure here at the Colorado Community College System, is now Deputy Secretary of Education, and her title is really long, so I'll cut it short. We'll just call her Deputy Secretary. She reached out and asked a question about what rules and regulations manufacturers are encountering or think they're encountering relative to the youth apprenticeships and youth apprenticeships law. So we sent out a survey, and the survey came back really disappointing. The vast majority of manufacturers believe that youth apprenticeships are not allowed. They're illegal either by federal or state law. And the reality is they're not. So we put this program together and put it out for National Manufacturing Day to help manufacturers understand that this really is a great source to build your pipeline. But as I said in my email earlier today, you don't have to take my word for it. You can hear from the experts and they're going to tell you. Before we get started, so Dean, who we'll introduce here in a second, he's from the Employers Council, who's helped put together this program today. So my shout out to the Employers Council. If you're not a member of it and you have questions with labor law and everything else, it's a great organization to be a part of. You can reach out to me and I'll make the proper connection to you inside the Employers Council. We also have with us Lauren Schwartz. Lauren is with the State Chamber. And if I call you Casey 2 or 3 times in this call, my apologies. Some of you may remember Casey, the old organization that we called Casey, not to be confused with Casey Sachs. Today, they're called the State Chamber. CAMA has a wonderful relationship with the State Chamber. They are our voice, and by ours, yours, your voice at the legislature. We work closely with them to make sure that the small manufacturers' voices in particular are heard. We've had major impact with the State Chamber on some key pieces of legislation or proposed legislation, like the Mandatory Leave Act that they tried passing last year. And this year, when they tried decoupling Colorado from the federal income tax code, which would have been devastating to Colorado manufacturers, the State Chamber reached out to make sure that we were representing the small voice of manufacturing, and they made sure our voice was heard. And as you know, thanks to the efforts of the State Chamber, that law was unfortunately not defeated, but watered down significantly to make it at least palatable for small businesses. So because they're a legislative voice, they also take on a role that we do with them each year, and that is to reach out to the governor to recognize National Manufacturing Day. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lauren and let her tell us all about it.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Lauren Schwartz, Director of Investor Relations for the Colorado Chamber of Commerce, as Tim mentioned, formerly Casey. Pleased to be here. As you may or may not know, the Colorado Chamber is the official affiliate of the National Association of Manufacturing, which is how we came to be part of this partnership with CAMA. And not to turn it into a huge love fest, but I do have to give a lot of kudos and credit to CAMA for being such a strong partner with the Colorado Chamber. Our main mission, as Tim aptly said, is to advocate a pro-business agenda at the state capitol and at the federal level. And it's because of our members and their involvement with us and raising their voices and giving the perspective of how legislation will affect business in Colorado that we're able to achieve what we do. And CAMA has been such a strong partner. So thanks to all of you who are members of CAMA and the Colorado Chamber. We're just thrilled to be here and be part of this and represent Colorado as I think number 11 in manufacturing in the state. So thank you for being here.
Do you want to share the resolution?
Oh, the resolution. Well, I did not plan on reading that.
You don't have to read it. I am
going to, what I will do is I will give you the summary and let you know. I probably don't want to bore you with all of the fancy language anyway, but I'd be happy to forward that to the group. I'll see if I can dig up the link and put it in the chat box. But I will say, we were able to persuade the governor to declare not only today National Manufacturing Day, for the state of Colorado as well, but the governor gave us a proclamation naming October Manufacturing Month. So congratulations. I think that speaks to the prominent role that all of our manufacturers have played in the last year, and particularly how they have stepped up as a crucial business, in fact, to keep their doors open, keep their employees and their customers safe. It really gave us great honor that the governor recognized that for all of the manufacturers in Colorado. And so thank you. You all earned that proclamation today. And I apologize that I wasn't prepared to read it.
I wasn't looking for you to read it. I just wanted you to mention it. It
Thank
really,
you.
Casey's, the state chamber's relationship with the governor. Each year we ask them to go, they do it. Many times before I even mention it, they've already got the requests in place. So thank you, State Chamber, for getting that recognition. The manufacturers do need to be recognized that. So we will get that proclamation out to all of you. All right, with that, let's get this program started. We're going to do it in this order. I want everybody to hear from the federal perspective first. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Casey Sachs. Casey, you got it. So she knows Zoom better than I do. She's already got the screen presenting. It's all you.
Thanks so much, Tim. It's great to be with you all today. Hello, friends in Colorado. So as Tim mentioned, we reached out to CAMA maybe a month ago to talk about what are some of the barriers to doing some sort of work-based learning opportunity with young people. And what we found from CAMA members was that folks there seem to be a lot of myths in the area. So my interest is what I want to share with you. And then Dean will really get into the meat of what is allowed, how you get waivers for if you want something that isn't allowed, what that really looks like. So I'm actually really excited for Dean's part of the program as well. And then the other folks who you'll hear from is really the benefit that you're seeing for local manufacturers in Colorado to do some sort of apprenticeship program. So I want to just get everybody started by interacting. If you'll get into chat, and will you chat just 1, 2, or 3 a number, did you have a summer job when you were in school? So when you think back to when you were a high school student, did you have a summer job? So 1 is, yep, every year. 2 is maybe a couple of summers, or 3, nope, I was doing other things. So let's pull up what we've got in chat. And it's 1, every single one of you, 1, 1, 1. Amy says, yep, I was working at my parents' shop. Dean, every single year. Every person on this call has said every year I had a summer job. And so did I. I worked at a grease monkey changing oil every summer that I was in high school. And it was a great opportunity for me. And clearly that's not the career path that I went down, but I learned a lot of things from that job. And I think all of you would say the same thing, that you learned something from that summer job. And so we know that's true. But we also see that today's teenagers are a lot less likely to have a work experience than folks from previous generations. So the yellow bar on this screen is that July employment by generation, and the blue screen is overall annual average of employment. And what you see is that average is just creeping down. So the baby boomers, more than half had that summer job. Gen X, more than half had that summer job. Then we get into millennials and post-millennials, and we're well below half. And in fact, this past summer, early data coming in from the Bureau of Labor Statistics suggests that very few students had a summer job, which is not surprising with the pandemic, but also concerning because we recognize that there's so much learning that happens with that work experience. So we also know that since 2000, and really, so this graph goes all the way back to 1963 when we started tracking youth labor participation, that for all races and ethnicities, there's a drop in participation in the summer months for labor participation. So we just see this sneaking down of how many kids have summer jobs. And when I disaggregate that by family income, what we actually see is that students whose families have less money are way less likely to participate in the labor force. And so this is even more concerning, that if you don't have a parent who has access to, you know, a person who can help get you a job in the summer, you're not going to have a job. And so it really means that our business community has to help figure out how to step in, because we know it's so important. How do we get people working, and what does that employment need to look like? So just one more that is particularly concerning to me. When I disaggregate that unemployment rate from last summer by race and ethnicity, and so these are for kids who are looking for a job last July, but who couldn't find one. Black and Hispanic students were almost twice as likely to not be able to find a job than white or Asian students. And so if you're interested in equity and we're talking about diversifying workforces, this is a really clear way to do it from an early age, that these are kids who want a job and who can't find one. And so at the same time, so, you know, I'm such an academic, I sort of want to know, why is this? Why aren't kids engaged with summer work in particular? And what we've seen is that that drop in summer employment has coincided with an increase in youth enrollment in summer school. So we've got the percent employed as the blue line and the percent in summer school is the red line. And so back in the mid 2000s, we saw a cross there, and that now more students are in summer school than who are working. So I start to ask questions about, why is that? Why has summer school enrollment increased? And potentially, so these are just hypotheses right now, a high school might be more demanding. People perceive that the returns for more school are increased, and so they're putting a priority on that. You all might have other hypotheses. I would love to hear them, but those are a couple that I've come up with that sort of seem plausible. And at the same time, some other possible factors could be that the state minimum wage increased sharply after 2005, and so that could have priced teenagers out of the job market. Or we could also see competition from older workers, immigrants, and even college graduates who are willing to take low-wage jobs, and that could drive down labor force participation by adolescents. So if you think about someone who has that bachelor's degree in communications, who's your barista at Starbucks, that's a job that a high schooler could have, but instead we're seeing somebody who's gone to college and who's not using their degree in that sort of lower skilled job area. So I want you to chat in, because I want to know what you think the impact will be. So 1, 2, 3, or 4 this time. How much of an impact do you think that that decrease in labor participation has on our students who started college just this fall? So 1 is that it has a large impact, 2, maybe some impact, or 3 is no impact, or 4 is that you haven't really considered it yet and you're not sure. I'm seeing a lot of 1s again, a large impact, a couple of 2s from the group, maybe some impact, but largely 1s coming through. And I agree with you that because we know that some of the best predictors of success in work are success in prior work, it really makes this job such an important thing, that first work experience. And if you're hiring somebody who's 24 years old and they've never had a job before, you can have really different expectations for a first-time employee than you have for somebody who has some work experience. We all know that. It's why we put work experience in our job descriptions. And so the reality and what we're seeing is that the impact for that decreased youth labor participation is that students are saying in that first job, particularly in high school, they can learn what they don't like. Learning that they're afraid of blood and that they don't want to go into healthcare is an incredibly important learning opportunity before they invest years of their lives studying something in healthcare that's going to get them into a field with blood. It helps with budgeting, time management, people skills. Students talk about learning skills that are needed for promotion and then higher wage occupations later in life. So it's really a building block for having success in work. Employers, you all tell me all the time that students are missing soft skills, and the students who are missing soft skills are things like showing up on time and looking work appropriate and knowing how to talk to your supervisor or collaborate with a coworker. And these are all things that you learn from working. And so if you've never had a work experience, these aren't explicitly taught in a classroom. So you might know how to sort of functionally do it, or you might understand the math, but you might not understand the work environment. And so it even makes it more important to try and figure out, how do we get more students into the labor market? So I'm going to turn it over to Dean, because what we've heard over and over again is that folks think that they can't bring young people into work, particularly in manufacturing. And if there are federal regulations, especially, that are keeping you from doing that, I need to hear about them so that I can work on fixing that. But the thing that we've seen more often is that it's more of an urban legend, and that largely you could, as manufacturers, bring people in to work in your shops, and that there's some other perceived barriers. So Dean, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
All right, before you start, Dean, Casey, did you just call Grady Cope an urban legend?
Maybe.
Okay, Dean, from the Employers Council, set us straight, dispel the myths, and let everybody know what we need to do to make this legal. Oh, wait.
Very good. Hi, I'm Dean Harris. I'm an attorney and the Western Slope Area Manager for the Employers Council. By the way, my vote was for Black Sabbath. I'm a little of a metalhead. Although to bridge and bring everyone together, I will point out that there are more than a few rock historians and journalists who believe that one of the earliest proto-metal songs was Helter Skelter off of the Beatles' White Album, and that it influenced both Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin to a great degree. That's the kind of value added I'm bringing to the panel today, you know, so a little rock history. But let's get back to the
and you
the real
just got
subject.
an absolutely true in the chat box. So
there we go. Look at that. See? All right. Let's see. Let's take a look at the screen here. What I'm going to, go ahead and share. Come on. Has everyone seen my slide deck now? Okay, good. You can never be sure with Zoom. I have too many windows open. Let's talk a little about what the truth is. We'll talk a little about what the fiction and the corresponding truth is with some things with youth apprenticeship. Obviously, only have a very short time and a lot to cover, so I'll just cover a few of the highlights here. We're going to just be able to recognize some of the requirements of federal and state laws that affect apprenticeships. And we want to remove some of the perceived impediments. Whoops. Apparently, I'm going the wrong direction. There we go. So what is an apprenticeship not? An apprenticeship is a structured position that combines education with work experience and allows young learners to gain valuable work experience. It is not legally an internship, paid or unpaid. An internship is a beast of another type that is much more educational oriented. It's not an entry-level job, so if your thought is in getting apprentices is you just want to get cheap labor, you want to get help. That's really not the purpose of the program. The purpose is develop people that are skilled that will help your workforce. So the thought is, oh boy, if we bring in apprentices, there's just too many restrictions on what they can do, or what they can't do is more accurate. Keep in mind, under both federal and state law, and when we talk youth apprentices, we're talking usually someone between about 16 and 24 years of age. But the restrictions under the law apply only to our 16 and 17-year-old apprentices. Those are the only ages that are really affected, by the child labor laws in both state and federal law. Now, work hours, federal, no restrictions. Federal law doesn't really restrict the work hours of 16, 17-year-olds. Colorado, on the other hand, does have some restrictions, but they're not onerous. No more than 8 hours per week, no more than 8 hours in a 24-year period. Yeah, 24-hour period. There's different rules for seasonal agriculture, but that doesn't really affect us. So realistically, a 16 or 17-year-old can still work a fairly normal work schedule. No restrictions on the spread of hours for 16 and 17-year-olds. They can work pretty much any type of schedule that we ask them to work. I often get asked questions about work permits. Wait, we can't hire teenagers if they don't have a work permit, can we? Really, there is no federal work permit per se. The Department of Labor recommends a certificate of age for hazardous occupations. This is a process where you apply to the federal government. You supply proof of the person's age. Frankly, it's the same proof they would supply probably when they are presenting authorization of their ability to work, just like everyone else. With the I-9 process. Colorado really has no specific restrictions in this area. School attendance. All the federal law says is for 16-year-olds, it has to be outside of school hours. Other than that, there's really no specific restrictions tied to this for this age group. Here's the one that usually gets people worried in a manufacturing setting. Oh my goodness, what about everything we do is so hazardous? We can't have an apprentice. There are 17 under federal law, 17 occupations that are prohibited for 16 and 17-year-olds. But at least 7 of those hazardous occupations are exempted for youth that are in a registered or certified apprenticeship. Colorado gives a pretty lengthy list of hazardous occupations, but says that there is an exception if the minor is employed in an apprenticeship program, which takes away just about all the restrictions under state law, and we still have some under federal law. Apprenticeship exemptions. So a hazardous occupation is permitted if all 4 of the following conditions are met. Pretty simple. We have an apprentice in a craft that's recognized as apprenticeable. The work of the apprentice is incidental to his training, so it's not his entire job to merely work in the most hazardous task. It's intermittent, short periods of time he is supervised. Well, that's what an internship's all about. We have them working under the supervision of a journey person of some sort. And the apprenticeship is registered. This isn't for just a program that someone puts together, calls it an apprenticeship to avoid any sort of regulation. What are these hazardous occupations? I won't go through each of them individually, but as you can see, they're pretty extensive. Some of those, obviously make a great deal of sense. Ionizing radiation, radioactive substances. As we go through these, though, you'll see that some of them I've highlighted. These are the hazardous occupations in which a youth apprentice can participate if those requirements are met. So power-driven woodworking machines are accepted. Again, quite a few more. But not all of these are off limits for our 16 and 17-year-old apprentices. And of course, there's no limitations on anyone who is 18 or older. So if we have a proper apprenticeship, apprentices can use power-driven metal forming, punching, shearing machines, can use any sort of power-driven meat processing machinery, balers, compactors. So quite a few exceptions. And finally, apprentices that are properly supervised can even use saws and cutting equipment, perform roofing or trenching or excavating. So you can see there are a wide variety of occupational areas that are open to youth apprentices. Again, power-driven woodworking machines. And you can just see real quickly the types of machinery, on which or the occupations that are open to some of our youth apprenticeships. It's pretty extensive for manufacturers. There are some other exempted occupations that have their own exemptions. So 16 and 17-year-olds can work with scrap paper balers and compactors under specified conditions. They can load, they just can't unload or operate them. 17-year-olds may even drive on duty under specified conditions. One of the other objections, well, what about workers' compensation? We can't get workers' compensation for teenagers, can we? Or, would it be prohibitively expensive? I think the best evidence that, that workers' comp is not a significant impediment to youth apprentices is the fact that Pinnacle Assurance, which of course is a huge, underwriter of workers' compensation insurance, I think this is still true. At least it was until very recently. Has the largest force of career-wise high school apprentices in the state of Colorado, and they have bought in and are highly involved in youth apprenticeships. Interestingly enough, you can see that opens up beyond what we traditionally think of as an apprentice field, but they have people working, apprentices working in underwriting and other types of insurance occupations. Really, workers' compensation in Colorado is interesting. A workers' compensation law, and if any of you work with workers' compensation or have ever had to get involved in the defense of claims, doesn't define an employee. The the law defines employment, defines employing units, it defines employment, but it just doesn't, it takes 34 sections to tell us what isn't employment without ever defining the word employee. But there's no exclusion for youth apprentices. There's an exclusion, the only one that applies to youth would be, there's an exclusion, the parents don't have to carry workers' compensation on their child under 21 who works for them. So that's really about it. Workers' compensation is highly available. Talk to your company. There's no reason that workers' compensation coverage won't cover youth apprentices. The FLSA, boy, if we have apprentices, paying youth is way too complicated. I don't want to get involved in that. Fact of the matter is, here is really, there we go. That was pretty much, that's the law on FLSA on youth apprentices. There just isn't an objection out there under the FLSA. Youth apprentices are employees. Since they're employees, they're protected by the minimum wage and overtime protections of the FLSA. But you treat them like any other employee for purposes of the Fair Labor Standards Act. They work, they get paid. If they work over, you know, they get overtime. They have to make minimum wage. Now, white collar exemptions, of course, are probably very unlikely for an apprentice. I just can't imagine an apprentice that would meet the high qualifications for the executive or the administrative exemptions. And even probably not even computer, the computer professional exemption because of the level of responsibility and decision making that's required. But so most apprentices will be non-exempt employees under the FLSA, and just like any other employee. There's really only two occupations going through all the regulations of the FLSA where both youth employment exemptions and wage exemptions overlap. Newspaper delivery and home workers employed in the making of evergreen wreaths. So, you know, I don't know that any of you present today have a lot of youth clamoring to do an apprenticeship at your organization to make Christmas decorations. My favorite exemption in the whole FLSA, by the way, I've always wondered about that one. What lobbyists put in homemakers that make Christmas decorations? So wrapping up, it's pretty simple. We pay apprentices overtime minimum wage like everyone else. We provide them workers' compensation just like everyone else. And we can hire youth then into the vast number of permitted or accepted occupations that are available to them. Simple as that. Thank you very much. And whoops, I already forgot who I'm supposed to turn it over to. So,
okay, Dean, why don't you just leave your slide up there for a minute?
There you go.
If I need to capture your contact information, they can. I've been watching the chat. Are there any questions for Dean? We might as well bring them up right now. It's a good chance while they're fresh. Anybody have anything? You can just use the chat box. Put the questions in and I'll make sure he sees them. Actually, he'll see them anyhow. So anything from anybody? Thumbs up, thumbs down in the chat room. How many people know about CareerWise? Since he brought it up under Pinnacle. Got one hand. Yep. Okay. So if you're not familiar with CareerWise, CareerWise is the youth apprenticeship program. It actually, CAMA actually put the first $1 million into launching CareerWise, and it went off on its own as a 501c3. It's modeled after the Swiss program, so I don't want to go too into that because it's going to steal a little bit from Gunner's presentation. But it's one of many, what we've come to learn, youth apprenticeship programs in Colorado. So if you're interested in learning more about CareerWise, I can help you get that information and make the introductions. But if you just want to explore it on your own, those are questions you can also put to Mike Gunner and Grady Cope, who will be talking next, because they use a little variation of both. I think they both have used CareerWise at one time, and they use non-CareerWise apprentices. So I'll let them speak to the details. I'm not seeing any questions coming up, so you must have covered everything, Dean. Anybody? I'm scanning one last time. So no questions for Dean. He's not
Thank you.
all, so we can come back to him if we need to. What I want to do now is I'm going to turn it over to both Mike Gunner and Grady Cope. These are, if you've participated in any of these programs over the last 5 years, you've probably heard from these two men, as they have definitely been early adopters of the Youth Apprenticeship Program. Mike Gunner actually preceded the formation of CareerWise. In fact, the trip that Pinnacle Insurance was on that went to Switzerland, Mike hosted in their facility in Switzerland. Again, they actually preceded CareerWise and many of the youth apprenticeship programs here in Colorado. So what I'd like to do is let Mike and Grady sort of start off with overviews. We'll do it alphabetically. So Grady, you're first. I want them to just sort of give an overview of why they're doing it, how they started doing it. I do have some specific questions I'll throw at them if I need to. But again, use the chat room. We're trying to keep this very informal, albeit virtually. So if you have questions, throw them into the chat box. We'll address them as we go. With that, Grady.
Thanks, Tim. So we started, for the longest time, especially as, coming out of the 2008-9 recession, again, the biggest problem for manufacturing was skilled workers. So you could go out and try to hire and take workers from people in Colorado and try to recruit them in the state and things like that. And you still couldn't come up with enough. So we finally came to the conclusion, and being involved with CAMA and developing CareerWise, that and actually traveling to Europe and seeing how they were developing their skilled workforce over there forever. And we had just lost all chance of being able to do that here. It was time for us to get involved. And so we got involved with CareerWise and Cherry Creek High School or Cherry Creek School District, and started figuring out how can we get kids in. We started with just internships where kids would come in the summer or even during the year, and that was awesome. And then we interviewed and brought on our first 2 apprentices when CareerWise. I can't remember what year did CareerWise kick off, Tim? Do you?
15.
Yeah, and so they were both juniors in high school, and both of them are now graduates of that program, and both work here full time. And one of them is continuing on to college, which we're supporting. We've got our second batch of apprentices now. Duncan, who you'll meet later, is one of them, and it's the only way we now know that we're going to be able to rebuild or build our workforce. And it's a really positive thing. This summer, we also, along with our apprentices, I think we had 9 internships with kids from the school, and we're lucky. Cherry Creek just built the innovation campus over here next to us, and so we work. Our employees go over there and help out when they can. Before COVID, now we're helping out via Zoom or any way we can. And our apprentices, the same thing, help out over there with the school and working with the students over there. So they're building, they've got a big influence on building out folks for not only manufacturing, but the building industry, the mechanic industry for aircraft and automotive. So we're real lucky in that respect. But having young people in the shop has been the most eye-opening experience that everyone in the shop, not only me, but every machinist back there, they all love it, and they're all of the youth has been accepted, and they're not even really looked at as youth, I can really say, because some of these young students come in with better aptitude for things like SolidWorks and things like that than some of our longer term people. So there's a whole level of newness and maybe some of the more advanced things that kids are learning in school today that is brought right into the shop, which just adds another value to that. And with that, Tim, I could probably turn it over unless there is something else you want me to touch on.
No, we'll come back into some questions. Mike, go ahead.
So I'm Mike Gunner. I'm the general manager of the US location of a Swiss company, Micron, and we make automation equipment. So we make the machines that make some of the more advanced medical device products out there. And in 2015, a number of things kind of converged. Number one, we moved from Aurora to Englewood. We were growing the business pretty rapidly. It was very easy to find engineers. Engineers want to move to Colorado. We have some really good schools here, but we were really struggling to find the skilled labor to make our machines work. So our apprenticeship program was developed to grow talent, to build the machine and then make the machine work. At the same time, Governor Hickenlooper went to our headquarters in Switzerland along with other companies and looked at apprenticeship programs. And in 2015, there was an accord agreed between Switzerland and the US where the ex-chairman of the board, who became the Minister of Industry, signed Micron up to take on apprenticeships in the US. So that's a hell of a way to get a new target on your goals. So we literally went from a question in January to starting in the summer. So we turned our program around in about 6 months. And what we did was we started asking, what is the value proposition for the students? We talked to some other Swiss companies around, Zurich Insurance, Beulah in North Carolina, Dateweiler in North Carolina as well. They gave us a lot of information, a lot of hints. And they were adamant that you have not only a value proposition for the company, so you can sell people internally, but also for the students themselves. So we went for the full Department of Labor apprenticeship. And number one myth, I know that we've touched on a lot of myths. The Department of Labor were fantastic to work with. So they will really guide you through this, whether you do the full DOL apprenticeship or not. Cynthia McCain and all that group will step you through the whole process. They'll put you in contact with companies like Grady's company, our company, and we'll hold your hand to get you through the program. And they'll put you in touch with CareerWise, the school districts, so that really it's a successful program. And so we started. We brought in 10 interns the first year. And one of the hardest issues we had was to filter. Really, the quality of students was so good. And every year they got better. You know, they really had a much more focus now in industry. The Cherry Creek Innovation Center, as Grady said, we're about half a mile from each other, and we're both about half a mile from that center. They're really doing a fantastic job to bring in students that want to learn, are interested in learning. They have the ability to run rings around the older folks. So they really push our people on the floor to think about things slightly differently. They're very capable as far as the newer technology. And they have the ability to take the grumpy old men on my shop floor and turn them into a nice, kind granddad. And that's a pretty amazing feat. So the benefits of the apprenticeship program are company-wide, not just for the individual departments that we employ them with. Over to you, Tim.
Okay, so I'm searching for a particular question. Grady, in the surveys that we did, there was a specific response that came back saying they couldn't pass the NTA skills training. I know you're heavily involved with that. Amy's on the call. I think she is as well. I know she is as well. Do you know what that is, and was that an issue in your shop?
Was that to me, Tim?
Yes, I'm sorry, Grady. Yes.
So I'm sorry. There was a crew walking by making a lot of noise. So this, are you talking about NIMS? Is that what you're?
No, this is not NIMS. It's called the Ntma Entry-Level Mechanical Aptitude Test.
Yes. Yes.
So you're familiar with that, and was that training that you took your apprenticeships and interns through?
We didn't use that aptitude test particularly, but I have used it in the past. The one we used was Cherry Creek adopted an aptitude test they were giving their students, and we first used that test. And it's, you know, I don't have a huge sampling to tell you whether it yielded a really good batch from that, but you know, I can tell you that when we first tried out the sampling test, I asked all my employees to take it, and none of them wanted to take it because they were afraid they were going to find out that they weren't capable. And I remember some of the scores. Some of the young kids had better scores than even I think I did on the test. So, you know.
Okay. So, Mike, let me turn this as a question to you as well. Then, did you put your youth apprenticeships and interns through any particular or special training, health and safety? What did you do to bring them on in the health and safety?
So we do the full onboarding process. So the kids come in, they have to sign up for as a normal employee. They go through a full day of health and safety. They have to do the P-test, the whole 9 yards. And part of the apprenticeship, and we use a 6-week internship program to actually have an interview process over 6 weeks with the kids. They come in and do the job there, is to treat them exactly the same as any employee. You know, we give them a statement list of things that we expect from them, you know, how they dress, turning up on time, following the rules, and being proactive. And we actually judge them on that. So during this 5-6 week internship program, it's part of the decision criteria as to whether they're going to carry on to the apprenticeship. To be quite honest, we've had no issues with anyone. We had one slight pinch finger once by one of the apprentices. They're very conscious of what they're doing because they don't know what they're doing. And then we team each apprentice up with a mentor. So they're really working with somebody else to learn the job.
So
but after 1 year,
could you elaborate on your mentorship role and the role of the mentor?
Yeah, so in the first year, we said it was totally voluntary, and we had a whole bunch of people turn up and say that they didn't want to do it. And by the end of the halfway through the internship, they were the same people who didn't want to do it, asking, could they do it? But the idea is that they are the key go-to person for the apprentice. They are able to pawn them out, so they become currency within the organization, so they can trade apprentices for different tasks. But they're responsible for making sure that the overall experience that the apprentice get is safe, relevant, and is actually adding to the list of criteria that we set out with the apprenticeship program. But it goes much further than that. They become very close. They become their friends. You know, we've had grandparents die, dogs die. We've had the first love come and the first love go. All of that is all discussed with the mentorship program. It becomes like a big brother plus. And it's very valuable for everyone. And now I think inside the organization, we don't ask for volunteers. We award people an apprenticeship mentorship, and it's actually seen as a good thing. It means that you're performing well inside the organization.
Grady,
can you explain how you do yours?
Sure. Very similar. We're smaller, so I have my lead for the apprenticeship program is also the head of my programming, and he went through, when he was in high school, he went through the entire apprenticeship program to become a machinist. When they were, you know, you had to work your way by using a file all the way up, and he's advanced with the industry as it advanced, and he's really taken a role. He works with the schools, he works with the teachers, and he works with each individual apprentice or intern, and he goes to trade fairs to help attract the apprentices, and then we interview them. They come in, they're treated just like a regular employee, and then they're set up on a schedule, and where they go and learn every part of the business that they can, and then over time they'll get more and more specialized in what they do, but they get help throughout the whole progress, and they've got one person that they can go to, and of course he assigns department heads to be kind of their mentor when they're in that department and work with them and help them.
So Amy's put a question in there. Amy, hold that for a second. I want to come back to that with a question I had. I'll blend together. But for both Mike and Grady, share with everybody, if you would please, how the rest of your staff interacted or reacted when you first began this program. I realize for both of you, that was several years back. So think about, when you first introduced this concept, what was the reaction on the shop floor or in the office?
So I'll go ahead, Mike.
So I think at the beginning there was skepticism. I think there's a inherent thought that youth of today are not going to be able to do the job that we'd asked them to do. We had a lot of discussions about if we feel that the students are not capable, then they could just watch you do your job. And within 2 weeks, that had completely changed. I mean, we had a couple of the apprentices teaching my shop floor manager some new tricks in CAD. By the time the second year came around, one of my first year apprentices was teaching one of his ex-teachers how to do the job. Because in the summer we were bringing in teachers during the summer, and that apprentice is now the supervisor of the apprentice program. So the change was dramatic and remarkable over the first 2 or 3 weeks even, where we went from we don't think they can do this to, oh, could they help me here, which is the key to an apprenticeship.
I'm going to almost say exactly what he said. When we first said we were going to do it, everybody's like, oh, we can't have kids in here, blah, blah, blah. But it took a week that they started seeing that. One, from what I can tell, and I'll be very general in assuming they're all that way, but as far as working on silicone or computers, the youth are way better than a lot of the machinists. So they see that automatically with the skill level of their software use and understanding of computers and being able to communicate through those means and understanding programs. They're already there in a lot of respects. And so they became accepted almost overnight. And nobody ever looks at them any differently. Even the interns that come on, everybody is culturally, they want to help and teach, and they all work at evaluating the students too that are here this summer. There were some summer interns that were here that everybody in the shop keeps asking, when are they coming into the apprenticeship program? Because they made that much of an impression on the short time they were here. So I would say it's easier to bring the students in now than it is to bring an outside machinist in. They'll be accepted much quicker.
I was remiss in asking this question earlier. If your youth apprenticeships or apprentices or interns were female? So
the one that's most wanted this summer was an intern, and she is by far had high skill levels to be a machinist, and she's one of the top students in the class over there at the school. And she had skills. Every department we put her in, every department head wanted her in his group or her group.
So you and Mike are now competing for her. Mike, how many women have come to the program?
So I think over the course of all the interns, we've had at least 8 So we've probably been about 20% female. We've had 2 actually join the apprenticeship program. One unfortunately left. The other one graduated this summer and is now an engineering student at School of Mines. And because of the work that she did with Metro State, she has about 2 years of course credits to her name. So she'll graduate from School of Mines in about 2 years. And then we'll welcome her back as an engineer.
So Grady, you talked, you started off mentioning a broad brush. I'm just going to wrap each question into this. There is exceptions to every rule. The survey that we sent out that I mentioned at the beginning of the program came back with a lot of comments about millennials have they don't show up on time, or sort of those soft skills that Casey mentioned. What has your experience been with what Amy referred to a good culture shift? Was it culture shift required, or were you finding people that were coming to the table with these skills? And if it was required, how would you help with that?
I'll say for the most part, they have the skills. Now, have there been some that haven't? Yes, but it's our job to help teach those skills. Some of those skills, the work-related skills, some people want the schools to teach them. I don't really know that it's the school's job to teach them. I think it's that's where private industry or business comes in, and that's kind of their job to help teach what's a norm expected in a business environment. So it's not been a horrible problem, but we have had to work with some, and know we'll have to work with some in the future. And yeah, it's like, yeah, this is a job. You come to work on time. You behave in a certain way, and so that's our job to work with them and teach that if we have problems and issues.
Mike?
Both Grady and I have worked with the Cherry Creek Innovation Center, and part of the grading of their students now is behavioral. And so they've taken the best of Grady and the best of Micron and put that together to, in the Innovation Center curriculum, make sure that kids are always behaving appropriately for work. So I'm like Grady, over the last couple of years, the kids have come in very, very well prepared. They tend to do a little bit of a boot camp before they come in, just to make sure, they understand what's expected. But once they're here, we've had no attendance issues. Everything's worked very smoothly.
Amy, I'll add to answer your question. I know CareerWise requires that boot camp. CAMA in the past has helped put that boot camp on for manufacturing. So again, the programs that are out there are trying to help with that culture shift before they get to the shop floor. So if they didn't address your question, Amy, feel free to add more to the chat box, and we'll dive a little deeper on that. Before I get to the next question.
Can I make one other statement?
Absolutely.
The other thing that's very important, and CareerWise has embraced this as well, is the relationship with the parents. Because we're asking kids that are, 16, 17-year-olds to make decisions that are going into their future. And without the support of the parents, it's extremely difficult. So we've had a student leave because they didn't have the support at home. So we spent a significant amount of outreach to the parents beyond the kids. The kids tend to have all the enthusiasm. You have to make sure there's enough momentum behind them so they can stick at it.
So I'm going to throw this to both Grady and Mike. Casey, please chime in. But we have a question: what can schools and districts do to support more apprenticeships? And then Amy chimed back in to say, yes, Cherry Creek's doing a great job, but what about the other schools? So how do we, Cherry Creek is absolutely an incredible, the program they put down there with the Innovation Center, which, by the way, did grow out of the trip to Switzerland that Mike and I referenced earlier. The superintendent for the Cherry Creek School District at the time accompanied us to Switzerland, came back and said he wanted to build that, the Cherry Creek Innovation Center, actually passed a bond issue to do it. a lot of other school districts are not in a position that they can do what Cherry Creek has done. So what advice can Mike, Grady, Casey, Dean, if you got ideas, what can school districts do to better prepare or make youth apprenticeships more available statewide?
Hard to answer. 'Cause
I'm off mute, so you want to go first? Casey?
Sure. So I think the first thing is that schools really need to listen to the Mikes and to the Gradys of the world and to teach the curriculum that best prepares students to enter the workforce. So that would be my first thing that I would tell you, that all of the schools in Colorado have access to career and technical education funding. They're required to have industry represented on their advisory boards. So if you're an industry person, be involved with your local school district advisory boards so that they're hearing what it is that you actually need. They're supposed to be grounding that in data and making sure that they put their investment into places where we have the greatest labor market needs. So it's also, you know, they don't want to design a program that takes all of this expensive machinery if there's only 3 students in your community that could possibly get jobs. So the other thing that I've seen from Mike and Grady is they donated equipment. They were really engaged with the school that they're working with. But I think about others in Colorado, like Westminster's got a phenomenal program and really interested in getting students into the workplace. And several of your community colleges are as well. Front Range has some great stuff going on. Arapahoe's doing some incredible stuff in healthcare. And so if you're in those areas, community colleges are broken up by service areas. Your high schools are based on geographic location. So it might not be realistic for someone on the Western Slope to come work with the Cherry Creek Innovation Center, but you've got some great stuff happening at Delta Montrose Technical College. And so getting engaged with Delta Montrose Technical College and making sure, first of all, that they understand the skills that you're hiring for, but also that you're willing to hire students is really important. And the things that I've seen Mike and Grady do is they send people to teach. They send people from their shops over to the school to make sure that the curriculum is what it is that they're looking for. And so it's a really tight partnership in a way that they don't just say, well, we didn't get what we wanted from the school, so we give up. But the school's also very engaged and very interested in listening to what it is that they want. So it's that two-way partnership that I think is so important in making that work.
Grady, you want to add to that?
Sure. I would also say that this is one area where I think CareerWise could help. If you talk to them and say, who do you know in the schools in my area? And they should have, they've worked hard. I know Denver works hard with their students. It's so important to get, if you're a business and you want to approach this, get involved with the schools close to you, because there are willing administrators and teachers that want to work with business to help in this regard, to the point where like Mike had one of the instructors from the Innovation Center worked as an intern in their shop to learn and understand, how can I take this information from the business back to the school to help those students. So I think there's, don't give up and don't think, well, Cherry Creek just has all the money, because it's not true. I know that Denver has a big program, and I believe Adams County has a fairly large program that they're trying to help out with.
And I think,
Go ahead, Mike.
I go back to the very beginning where, we created a value proposition for our company to bring on apprentices. We understood what the value was, why it was worth making an investment. You don't go to a showroom and buy a $250,000 piece of machinery just because it looks pretty. You have to do the background work. You have to do everything to make sure it's going to be successful. And you should approach an apprenticeship with the same mindset. It requires effort from you. You have to understand what is the value to you. For us, we have access to a workforce that doesn't exist. You're chasing resumes, you're chasing people that have graduated high school, other companies are out there chasing. We're getting students in before they're even on the job market, and they're coming in and they're working with us and are being trained in the Micron way. You can argue it's the right way, the wrong way, but they're becoming Micronets. And so that's the way that we generate our workforce, and that's our value proposition. So please consider this as a tremendous investment in your company's future.
So before we move on to our two students, we had some questions going back and forth. Back to you, Dean. It came in, and if you saw it, Larry's asking, Dean, still unclear how to allow 16 to 17-year-olds to operate metal working equipment. We are currently enrolled with CareerWise. You had a slide with 4 rules for hazardous exemptions. Christopher has chimed in and said you should be able to use the existing. So I'm not going to read these. If you see these, Dean, can you speak to this while we get the students? You're on mute, Dean.
Sure. I was going to go back and see if I could put that slide back up. Let me see if I can find it here.
So Christopher's throwing out there, we heard a lot of talk about Cynthia from the Department of Labor. She is based here in Denver. She's wonderful to work with. She has been around for eons and she knows her stuff. So Larry, if you need that introduction for that help with that, I could certainly do it. But I saw some chats going on about Cynthia and one of the two spoke of her. So great resource, and she will help you get your apprentice approved. Go ahead, Dean.
Very good. Let's see. Let's bring that up again from current slide. All right. I have too many screens open here. Let me move something around here so I can figure out where everyone just went. Okay, I'm having some technical difficulties because I can't see everyone else and can't for some reason can't pull up the screen sharing
Tell you what, Dean, why don't we move to the students and then
yeah. Let me just real quickly, I'll say this. You know, there were 4 conditions that have to be met. Has to be a craft recognized as an apprenticeable trade. Now, the easy answer on that one is if it's a registered apprenticeship, it's going to be in a craft recognized as an apprenticeable trade. And, you know, it doesn't sound like the fields we're talking about are highly unusual. The work of the apprentice is incidental to the training. So simply put, the entire purpose of the job isn't to only operate that machinery. That is just a part of the training and a part of the job that the apprentice performs. And of course, the third requirement is that it is for intermittent for short periods of time, but it's under the supervision of a journeyman that and that of course is already built into the apprentice program. So and then the final requirement that it was a registered apprenticeship. So those that were suggesting that, hey, get with the Department of Labor and they'll help you through this is exactly right, because it's really just a procedural issue then at that point. Because all of these things, if we have a properly constructed and registered apprenticeship, the other things are sort of met automatically. You know, they'll be taken care of by the nature of the apprenticeship itself.
Lauren is asking if we can get your slides to send them out, or if you want to email them to. If you can email them to Lauren right now, my guess is she could work her magic and get them posted in the chat room. I
am doing that right now here.
Greg has said there are numerous ways to build ships with ships. I'm assuming that's internships with any school in any zip code. Apprenticeships, internships, mentorships. Oh, I see what you're saying. Thank you. Partnerships. Thus, suggesting for industries to build relations with schools is great. You don't need a large district or a statewide program. The potential to stem the gap is what industry business is with each industry, business, and each school. So thank you. I totally agree. And thank you for putting the ships upright. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to introduce Matt and Duncan. Matt is now my gunner, if you're seeing Hollywood Squares on your screen. Matt works for Micron, and Duncan works for Riata with Grady. let's see, being this alphabetical, Duncan, you're going to be first. Introduce yourself, if you will. Tell us who you are, what school district you're in, and how long you've been on the job with your internship or apprentice. And define, my guess is since you're in school now, you both are apprentices. But if you started as an intern, explain that as well. So go ahead, Duncan.
All right. So I'm Duncan Hale. I'm 17. Right now I'm a senior at Eagle Crest High School, which is in the Cherry Creek School District. I started my apprenticeship in June of last year. So I've been working here for a year and that entire summer. And I started out right as an apprenticeship, but I've worked with other interns and I've actually mentored them a little bit. And so that was cool. So yeah, that's me.
Great. Matt?
My name is Matthew Fry. I'm 19 years old. I graduated from Grandview High School, which is also Cherry Creek School District. This is my third year as an apprentice. I started out as an intern in my junior year of high school, and I've been working here since. I moved on to an apprentice, and now I'm going to Metro downtown for college, and I should be finished up with the apprenticeship after this year.
Great. So to both of you, what led you to get into a program like this? What inspired you? What motivated you to look into this and join this?
Would you like to go first or?
You go ahead, Duncan. Oh, okay, either one.
All right.
Go ahead.
So what got me interested, really, I saw it. I didn't even go to any of the job fairs or anything. It was just my teacher brought it up. He had a slide in my engineering class, and he went through some internship opportunities, some apprenticeship opportunities, and he brought up CareerWise. And when I saw that I would be able to come here as part of my class credit and work and get real working skills rather than, like math that you'll only need to know in that math class and all sorts of classwork, I thought that it was a good opportunity. And then I joined. I sent out my resume, got accepted by RIATA, and then I found out I got paid. And so that was really nice too. And so, yeah, it was really just the opportunity. I thought it was a good way to kind of differentiate myself and get some good experience.
Great. Matthew.
I got into this because I was in an engineering class, learning how to do SolidWorks stuff in high school. And Mike Gunner actually came in and explained the whole apprenticeship opportunity with us. And I've always been into working with my hands, working on cars, building things. So when he did the slideshow on it and everything, and I was into it right away. So I signed up and went through the whole program, and yeah, it's a really good opportunity. And now I'm going to Metro and I'm still working here full time. And yeah.
So what was, to both of you again, what is your favorite part of the position? Go ahead, Matthew, you're still up. So what's your favorite part?
My favorite part is just being able to be able to work with my hands and get the job experience. I feel like it's given me a lot of maturity. I'm treated like any other worker here, which is great. And it's nice to be able to be on a project with all the adults and everybody else and be treated the same as everybody else and be able to work with my hands, and they give me things to do just like they'd give anybody else things to do.
And
Duncan?
if I could,
Go ahead.
a little bit, without breaking confidentiality, Matt is actually responsible for about 25% of a machine that is making COVID testers. So the work that he's doing has an impact across the whole country, and going off into Europe as well. And so, it may be classified as an apprentice. The work he's doing is extremely relevant to today's situation, and to making everywhere safer.
Great job. Duncan, how about you?
So my favorite part would probably be, well, first, just the environment, kind of what you guys talked about before with the culture shift. You know, the other two apprentices before me that came in with CareerWise, they kind of laid the groundwork. And now when I came in, I was accepted almost immediately. And it was just it's a great environment. It's not, I know that sometimes big corporations are apprehensive to get apprentices, but I think talking with my friends and stuff, sometimes the apprentices themselves would also be a little apprehensive, and I don't think they should be there. Lots of these companies will take you with open arms, and that's probably my favorite part is here at Riata. It's just everyone gets along, and you can feel like you really belong.
So Duncan, while you're still there, I'm going to put you on the spot because you're still in school. Matt, I'm going to come back to you so you get a chance to think about where you were 3 years ago. But Duncan, you're still going to school. So how many days a week are you in school? How many days a week are you at Riata?
So with this weird schedule, usually the way Cherry Creek high schools work is you have a block schedule, and so you alternate days. And so usually I would alternate that. With COVID, the schedules are different. Right now, I'm only going to school on Wednesdays, and then I'm working Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursday or Friday. I'm keeping one of those off to deal with schoolwork and homework and stuff like that.
Okay. So Matthew, putting you to the same question because you went through this when there wasn't COVID, and you had access to a lot more extracurricular activities, sports, clubs, things like that. How did you balance that?
It was kind of tough. I wrestled throughout all of high school, so I was busy with practices and all that stuff, along with doing this, and I was also working another job as well. So I had a really busy schedule, but usually when I came to Micron, it was during one of my class periods. So I would just drive down here for one of my class periods and then work here for a couple of hours, and that would be every other day. So I still was able to manage all of that stuff, and now I'm doing college. Last year, I would go back and forth from Metro back to Micron, and I'd be working as many hours as I could throughout the week. And now everything's online, so I can pretty much work a full 40-hour week and still be able to get my schoolwork done.
By the way, I'm sitting in the Advanced Manufacturing Sciences building in Metro State. So I know that drive from here to Gunners, and you were putting some miles on the car. So,
oh, yeah.
So the question to both of you now, if you encountered a classmate, or when you do encounter a classmate and they're asking, where have you been, or what are you doing, or they're asking about the apprenticeship program, how do you deal with that?
I'll go ahead and go first. I mean, I'm going to be honest, I kind of brag a little bit because I think it's a really cool opportunity. I tell them about CareerWise. I tell them about the apprenticeship opportunities. They usually think they're pretty cool. There have been a few that have actually asked me to kind of help them maybe go through the process a little bit. And so, yeah, I basically just, I really like this program. And so I basically just endorse it as much as possible.
Matthew, do you want to add anything to that?
I kind of, same way, I kind of brag about it in a way, because a lot of my friends are going to college. They're going to be $100,000 in debt. And they're pushing around carts at King Soopers or something like that, just trying to make the money right now because they're doing full-time school. And with this apprenticeship program, I'm still able to balance school and have a full-time job. So I always tell them about how great it is and how I don't have to worry about all that stuff. Not that different than following the regular route that everybody else follows, which is great in my eyes. I mean, I feel like school's put it in your head that you have to follow the same path. You go to school, and you go to college, and then you're in debt, and then you got to pay that off. You got to get, got to get a good job after college. And it's a different path than everybody else chooses, which I think it's a great opportunity. I don't have to worry about all those same things that they worry about.
So Casey, Mike, and Grady, I think both the testaments right there of Matthew and Duncan tell you how far we've come since, 2013 when we did the CHAMP grant. I remember one of the things, and I'm saying this to all the manufacturers on the call, just to let them know, I mean, when, 8 years ago, the issue that or the perception that we were dealing with is a student that went to Red Rocks or one of the other community colleges as a part of a split program with their schooling work, high schooling work, that they were somehow different or not on the same track. And it was, unfortunately, it was perceived negative. We've come a long way in 8 years. And I think that's a real testament to the adoption of youth apprenticeship. So just a quick commercial. If you're not plugged into one of these, the attitude and perceptions has changed dramatically in 8 years. And, it's a great time to plug into it. Final question.
And I would add that, Tim, before you ask a question, I would add that part of what is so great, Grady talked about Switzerland and their apprenticeship model. And something that's so wonderful about the Swiss apprenticeship model is that it's very permeable. And by that, I mean that you can get out of high school, do your apprenticeship, go to college, come back, work. And I think Mike really spoke to that. He talked about a young woman who worked for him for a while, did an apprenticeship. Now she's getting her engineering degree. And the thing that I loved about his story was that he said when she's finished with that degree, we will welcome her back to Micron as an employee, as an engineer. And so I think the other part to talk to even just families in your community, all of us are ambassadors for work-based learning and for apprenticeships and these kinds of models. And that it's so that people understand you have the capacity to go be an engineer, do that. Grady needs you. And so he wants you to come back to Riata. Mike wants you to come back to Micron. That's part of why you would get engaged in these programs in the first place, is that you really are building talent and you're building loyalty of people who liked your company and want to come back and keep working for you, because all of our salaries are pretty competitive and pretty on par with each other. And so you really are working for a company because you like it, not just because the pay is whatever it is.
Right.
You segued right into. Go ahead, Grady.
I just want to endorse what she said. Look, when I went to high school, when I got out of high school, I went to trade school to be a diesel mechanic, and I went and worked offshore for 5 years and made enough money to come back and go to college. I went to college and got my engineering degree and eventually started Riata. So it all connects together, and we just don't have to define it to where you've got to go to college right out of high school, because it just doesn't make sense. It didn't make sense for me when I was that age, and it made me a lot better college student, and I knew what I wanted to do when I got out of trade school. I mean, when I got out of my first job offshore, I knew that I wanted to be an engineer. I would have never guessed that coming out of high school. So
that you both just you provided the great segue to the last question for our two youth apprentices. Matthew, Duncan, what's next? Matthew, you kind of alluded to it. What's next?
For me, I plan on staying here, continuing my education over at Metro. I'm planning on, once I finish the certificate, I'm planning to go on my own and pay for an engineering degree. Just like the girl who worked here before, I just want to stay at Metro so I can keep working and pay for that myself as well. So I plan to become an engineer one day and climb the ladder.
Duncan?
Yeah, really similar to that. I'll graduate this year, and I'll have 1 year after that, and for that last year I'll be working full time, and we'll see. I'll probably continue to work at least part time, but I'm planning on going to college, becoming an engineer, not entirely sure which sort of type of engineer yet, but I definitely, after this experience and some stuff at school, know I want to go into STEM.
Matthew and Duncan, I want to thank you both personally. You are great ambassadors. Matthew, I've never met you. I've had the privilege of meeting Duncan. I just want to thank you both for being such great ambassadors. As Grady alluded to, oftentimes society likes to paint people with a broad brush. And, you guys are great examples of the opportunities that are out there for youth apprentices. So thank you very much for being such great role models for your peers, and do what you can to bring more into it. We are down to the final 7-8 minutes. Last call for questions or last call for comments from the panelists. If you have questions, just throw it into the chat box. I'll read them out loud, get everybody to comment on them. Or Dean, I don't know if you found your slide. Thank you, Lauren Schwartz. She has linked the slides in the chat room. So if you want to pull down those slides, you can. Questions? The floor is open. Dean?
No, I'm good.
Okay, so here's a question. What is the minimum legal age for an internship?
That sounds like a question to me, although it actually probably is a question for, for our Department of Education person. Realistically, the law only recognizes, the law I was discussing recognizes what can people do at different ages. So, usually my understanding is to be in a registered apprenticeship, I think the minimum age is 16. For wage and hour law, they're not so much concerned with how old you are, but what you can do at those different ages. So of course I didn't even address, labor law for 9-year-olds or 14 and 15-year-olds because that just doesn't apply here.
And so internships are different from apprenticeships. Apprenticeships are a formal registered experience. And the youth labor laws that come out of Department of Labor cover occupations for students who want to get involved. 16 and 17-year-olds are treated differently than 14 and 15-year-olds, but the federal laws would let you work in that space all the way down to 14, but there's more regulations for 14 and 15-year-olds than there are for 16 and 17-year-olds. And then states have different laws by state around youth labor laws. So those then start to vary. And I'm not familiar with what Colorado law allows or doesn't allow in terms of youth labor participation for a minimum age, to answer the question directly.
And I sort of talked around it because my poor eyes are reading it, read that wrongly on the screen. When we talk about an internship, we're usually talking about one of two things. A paid internship is anything you want it to be. You're just bringing someone in and providing some combination of work and education. And so companies will bring in someone and call it an internship. And what they really mean is we just want summer help to help us do our filing. Well, that's not really an educational experience. That person is no different than any other employee. They're really in an entry-level job is what they're in. When we think of a true legal internship has to provide an experience that is educational, that it provides roughly the type of learning experience that would be experienced in an educational setting. So it is not meant to replace employees. It's not meant to just supplement the workforce. It is designed to educate, as opposed to an apprenticeship, which is designed more to provide hands-on skills and is an employee who who is being trained progressively to develop work skills. So in that type of internship, those can be unpaid. And the law doesn't really speak to the age so much because an intern isn't an employee. An unpaid intern is in an educational experience. Now, we don't usually see internships much under about the same age we would, though, for an apprenticeship. And because, of course, there are the same federal and state laws on when they can work, how often they can work, how that relates to school. And so it just tends to preclude most people under the age of 16.
Any other questions? I don't see anything popping up. Any other questions popping into the chat room? Now's your chance. While we're kind of waiting and watching on that, anything from the panelists? Any last words? Gunnar, Matthew, Duncan, Grady, Dean, Casey, Lauren Schwartz, you back in?
No, I would just encourage anyone who's thinking about this to reach out to Grady, to myself, go through Tim, go through CareerWise. We will go into excruciating detail on how our system's set up, what we went through, best practices, because we all believe in this. And it is a fantastic opportunity for you as owners of companies, as leaders inside that company, as much as for the apprentices themselves.
Yeah, I want to double down on that. It's the most fulfilling thing that I think I've ever done in my career at Riata is bringing youth on board and watching the interactions and watching them develop. So, you know, there was always the saying, "Oh, I don't want. What if I invest all the money in somebody and then they get to a point where they're all trained and then they just go somewhere else?" And the saying is, well, that can happen, but would you rather not invest and not have anybody there that had talent? And the answer is always, you better develop the talent, because I guarantee if you do it right, many of them are going to want to stay with you and help your company grow right along. So it's just an all around good experience, and I would encourage anybody, and anybody's welcome to call, like Mike said, and talk to us, and we'll tell you why we think it's good and show you examples.
So on that note, I just put my email address in the chat box. You know, this program was advertised nationwide. It was broadcast throughout the state of Colorado. While I recognized a lot of names there as CAMA members, I recognize names that there are names I don't recognize. If you're Colorado in particular, and you've got questions, feel free to reach out to me. If you've got questions about CAMA, the Trade Association, please reach out to me. If you have comments about the State Chamber or the Employers Council, I'll be glad to make the introduction to Dean or Lauren, so that you can have those introductions as well. Use my email that I just posted. I will make the connections. I want to thank all of the panelists for your time, for your valuable information. Mike and Grady in particular, I want to thank you guys for being so open to youth apprenticeships and interns. Again, 8 years ago, when we were working on the CHAMP grant, one of the things that CAMA set in place or in motion was this notion that we want to quit buying our workforce. It's time to quit, you know, offering 50 cents an hour or more and stealing the guy from across the street to come into your machine shop. That, at the end of the day, is extremely inflationary and counterproductive to the sector as a whole. So we've worked very hard in getting the message out. Don't buy your workforce, build your workforce. And because of the statistics that you saw from Casey at the beginning, the best labor pool to build your workforce from really is our youth, men and women. And I can't emphasize that enough as well. So hopefully today you picked up the tools that you could use. If you need more information, please reach out to me. Be glad to make the connections. But thank you, panelists, for your time. Thank you for your information. I hope this was beneficial to everybody on the call. We did record it, so we will be making it available to school districts as well. I talked to a couple districts and they were like, we can't figure out how to do manufacturing day because we're still trying to figure out how we're doing classes. So we have recorded it and we're going to make it available to them so that they can use it at the appropriate time in their chaotic schedules right now of teaching in the COVID environment. So unless there are any other questions, I'll bring this program to an end. Thank you all for being here. Hope you found it valuable. And to all the manufacturers, happy Manufacturing Day. Thank you for what you do, and keep on making things and keep making Colorado manufacturing strong. Thank you all.
Thank you.